The colony of Callaway's Reach sat at the far edge of everything. It was the kind of place that did not appear on popular maps. It was not famous for anything. No tourist had ever asked to go there. The nearest large settlement was 4 hours away by shuttle, and that settlement itself was only a refueling post on a trade route that most ships tried to skip. Callaway's Reach was, in the plainest words, the last dot before the blank. About 200 people lived there. They worked shifts. They ate together in a long, low building they called the hall. They fixed things when things broke, and things broke often. The colony existed because of the terraforming relay station at its center, a tall, humming tower full of machines that slowly pushed the planet's thin atmosphere toward something breathable. It was important work, and even if it was slow and quiet and almost never exciting, the Authority had rules about this world. The Interstellar Authority was the body that governed all frontier colonies, and it had a standing order for Callaway's Reach that every new arrival had to sign off on before their boots hit the ground. The order was simple. The planet had native fauna, large, feline-like creatures with iridescent fur and eyes that caught light in strange ways. They traveled in bonded family groups. No one had fully studied them. No one had been allowed to. The order said, observe if you must, but never engage. Do not feed them. Do not approach them. Do not interfere with them in any way. Sign here, initial here, and welcome to the colony. Cal Norris had signed that form 3 years ago. He was 32 years old and worked as a maintenance technician. His job was the water recycling units, a network of pipes and filters and pumps that ran under most of the colony's surface and kept everyone alive. It was not glamorous work. It was often muddy. Sometimes it smelled bad. Cal did not mind. He liked having something to fix. He liked the straightforward logic of it. Something is broken. You find out why. You make it work again. The rest of life was harder to follow. He was a quiet man, not unfriendly, just careful with words. His bunkmate Pete Aldrin often said that talking to Cal was like reading a report. You got the facts, you got the conclusions, and then he was done. Cal thought that was fair. He had never been good at small talk. He was better at noticing things. He noticed the dust patterns near the eastern sensor posts before the filters clogged. And he noticed when the evening temperature dropped 2 degrees faster than usual, which meant a pressure change was coming. And on a Tuesday evening, walking the outer ridge to check a sensor array after a long shift, he noticed something small and dark huddled near a cracked boulder about 40 meters from the fence line. He stopped walking. He looked at it. It did not move. Cal knew what it was before he got close. He had seen them from a distance, the native creatures that the Authority called subject fauna, Class 4. The colonists had their own names for them. Some called them panthers because of the shape of them, the low shoulders and the long tail. Some called them shimmer cats because of the fur. The cubs were smaller than he had expected. This one was maybe the size of a large dog, though it was hard to judge in the low evening light. He should have turned around. He knew that. The form he had signed was very clear, but the creature was not moving the way a healthy animal moves. It was hunched. Its breathing was visible even from a distance, short, shallow pulls of air, and one of its back legs was caught between 2 sections of a collapsed drainage channel, a metal grate that the construction crews had left half buried in the ground 2 years ago. Cal had written a maintenance note about it. Nothing had been done. He walked closer. The cub snarled at him when he was about 5 meters away. It was not a strong snarl. It was the sound of something very tired and very scared trying to seem dangerous. The tiny, translucent teeth caught the last of the evening sun. The eyes, multifaceted, shimmering faintly, tracked him with the focused attention of something that had been paying close attention to threats for its entire short life. Cal crouched down. He moved slowly. He did not speak. He had learned early in life that most creatures, human and otherwise, calmed down faster when you stopped filling the air with noise. He looked at the trapped leg. The grate had shifted and pinched the joint above the paw. The skin did not look broken, but the angle was wrong. The cub had probably been there for hours. He reached into his jacket pocket and took out a ration bar. It was the one he had packed for the walk back, dense, calorie-heavy, made from processed grain and something that was supposed to taste like nuts. He peeled it open and set it on the ground, midway between himself and the cub. Then he sat back on his heels and waited. The cub stared at the bar. It stared at Cal. It stared at the bar again. Hunger won. It stretched its neck forward, sniffed the bar twice, and then ate it in 3 fast bites with the urgency of something that had not eaten in a long time. Cal watched it eat. Then he moved to the drainage grate. He worked carefully, using the flat edge of his multi-tool to lever the shifted section upward just enough to release the pressure on the joint. The cub went still while he worked, which surprised him. It watched his hands with those strange, shimmering eyes but did not flinch away. When the leg came free, the cub pulled it close and licked the joint twice. Then it stood, tested its weight, and looked at Cal. Cal leaned back and gave it room. The cub stood there for a moment longer than Cal expected. And it did not run immediately. It looked at him with an expression that Cal could not name. Not fear, not gratitude exactly, just something attentive and very still. Then it turned and limped away into the dark scrubland beyond the boulder, moving slowly at first, then faster as the leg found its rhythm. Cal sat on the ridge for a while after it disappeared. The evening wind came down off the high ground and pushed dust across the sensor posts. The relay tower hummed in the distance. The sky above him was going dark blue at the edges, the 2 small moons of this world rising pale and quiet. He thought about the form he had signed. He thought about a creature sitting alone in the dark with a trapped leg and nothing to eat. Then he picked up the empty ration bar wrapper, to put it in his pocket so it would not blow across the sensor field and trigger an alert, and walked back to the colony. He did not tell anyone what had happened. He wrote up the collapsed drainage grate in the maintenance log, flagged it as a safety hazard, and went to bed. He slept well. Better than he had in weeks, though he could not have said why. 3 days passed. Nothing unusual happened. The sun came up slow and pale each morning. The relay tower hummed, and the colonists of Calloway's Reach went about their work the way people do when they have been living in a hard place long enough to stop being surprised by it. Cal fixed 2 broken pump joints in the south water line, replaced a cracked sensor housing near post 7, and ate his meals in the hall without saying much to anyone. He thought about the cub sometimes, and he wondered if the leg had healed. He wondered if it had found its way back to its family. He did not go out to the ridge to check. That would have been pushing things, and Cal was not a man who pushed things without good reason. The colony had its own noise those 3 days. Administrator Donna Falk called a meeting on the second evening to talk about the supply shuttle. It was 9 days overdue. The authority's logistics office had sent a short message saying there were delays on the route. Nothing to worry about. Shipment was en route. Donna did not look convinced. She had the expression of a woman who had been told not to worry before and had learned that the right response to that phrase was to start counting supplies. The colonists listened. They asked questions. Donna gave careful answers. Cal sat in the back and watched people's faces. The relay station threw 3 error codes on the 3rd morning. Nothing serious, the kind of routine calibration faults that the system logged and resolved on its own. But the engineer on duty, a young woman named Amy Grove, called Cal in to check the secondary water coolant line that ran under the station's east wall. Cal checked it. It was fine. He told her so, wrote it up, and went back to the recycling units. It was a normal 3 days. Cal almost convinced himself that the cub was simply a thing that had happened and was now finished. Then the proximity alert went off. It was late. Past 9 in the evening, the second moon already up and throwing silver light across the ridge. Cal was the one on overnight watch for the outer sensor line that week, a rotating duty that everyone took turns at. The alert came through on his wrist unit as a low-level ping, the kind that meant something biological had moved within 30 meters of the fence. It happened sometimes, small animals mostly. The sensor did not distinguish between a fist-sized rodent and anything larger. It just told you something was there. Cal pulled on his jacket and walked out. He saw the cub first. It was sitting just outside the sensor fence, about 4 meters from the nearest post. It looked healthy. The leg it had injured was straight and steady. It was watching the fence line with calm, patient eyes, and when Cal came around the corner of the outer utility shed, it turned its head and looked at him. Cal stopped walking. Beside the cub, so still that Cal had not seen it until that moment, was the mother. She was enormous. Cal had seen the adult creatures from a distance before. Everyone at the colony had, at one time or another, spotted one moving along the high ridge at dusk. But distance made them look like large animals, impressive in a general way, the kind of thing you noted and moved on from. Up close, with nothing but 20 meters and a low sensor fence between them, the mother was something else entirely. She stood nearly 3 meters at the shoulder. Her body was long and heavy with muscle, built the way things are built when they have spent many generations being very good at surviving. Her coat shifted in the moonlight, deep violet sliding into coal black and back again, the iridescence moving slowly like oil on water. Her tail was still. Her ears were forward. Her eyes were the color of amber, and they were looking directly at Cal with an attention that made the back of his neck go cold. She was not growling. She was not crouched to spring. She was simply there, watching him, in the way something watches when it has made a decision to be present and is waiting to see how the other party responds. Cal's heart was hitting his ribs hard enough that he could feel it in his throat. Every sensible part of his brain was forming a clear sentence. Go back inside. Report this. Let someone else handle it. He stood there and listened to that voice for a few seconds. Then he crouched down slowly, the same way he had crouched on the ridge 3 nights ago, and waited. The cub walked up to the fence. It pressed its small nose through the gap between 2 sensor posts, not close enough to trigger the field, and sniffed in Cal's direction. Then it sat down and looked back at its mother, as if checking that this was acceptable. The mother did not move. They stayed like that for what felt to Call like a very long time. The night wind moved through the scrubland. Something small rustled in the dry brush to the left. The relay tower hummed its constant low note in the distance. Cal did not speak. He did not reach for his communicator. He breathed slowly and let the moment be what it was. Then the mother made a sound. It was low, resonant, and layered. The kind of sound that seemed to come from somewhere deeper than a throat, like it had been built in the chest, and the whole body was part of it. Cal had never heard anything like it. It was not a warning sound. It was not the sharp hiss or the rising snarl he had heard from scared animals. It was deliberate, measured, the kind of sound something makes when it is saying something it means. And then she lowered her head. Slow, steady, all the way down until her chin nearly touched the ground, and she held it there for a moment before bringing it back up. Cal looked at her. He understood, in the part of him that did not need words to understand things, that this was not accidental. It was a gesture, a clear, intentional gesture from a creature who had made the decision to be here tonight and was now doing something very specific with its body. He lowered his own head. Slow, the same way she had done it. He held it there for a breath, then lifted it again. The mother looked at him for a long moment after that. The cub looked at the mother looked at Cal. Then she made one more sound, shorter, softer, and turned and walked away into the scrubland. The cub followed, glancing back once before disappearing into the dark. Cal stayed crouching by the fence for a while after they were gone. His legs had gone stiff. His hands were trembling slightly. Not from fear, or not only from fear, but from the particular feeling that comes when something happens that you know is important and you do not have the right words for it yet. He walked back inside. He sat down at the monitoring station. He stared at the proximity alert log on the screen, which showed a biological contact at 21:14, duration 11 minutes, no breach of perimeter, no action required. He did not write anything else in the log that night. But he did not sleep much either, Cal told two people. He did not plan to tell anyone. He was not the kind of man who shared things easily. But the next morning at breakfast, Pete Aldrin sat down across from him with a plate of food and looked at him in that particular way Pete had, like he was reading a report and had found a number that did not add up. "You look like you did not sleep," Pete said. "I did not sleep much," Cal said. "Anything wrong with the water lines?" "No." Pete ate for a moment. "Something else, then." Cal looked at his coffee. Then he told Pete about the cub. And then, because once the first part was out, the rest of it wanted to follow, he told Pete about the mother, about the 11 minutes at the fence, about the gesture. Pete put his fork down partway through and did not pick it up again. Then he was a geologist, a practical man, good with evidence, suspicious of conclusions that jumped ahead of the data. He listened to the whole thing without interrupting. When Cal finished, Pete sat quietly for a moment. "She lowered her head," Pete said. "Yes? And you lowered yours?" "Yes." Pete picked up his fork again. "You need to tell Lena," he said. Dr. Lena Cross was the colony's physician. She was also, unofficially and entirely on her own time, the most careful observer of this planet's native life that Calloway's Reach had ever had. She kept notebooks. She had a small camera mounted on the outer wall of the medical building, pointed at the ridge, that she had installed herself and paid for out of her own supply budget. She had submitted 3 reports to the authorities' xenobiology office over the past 2 years, and received 2 automated acknowledgments and 1 short message telling her that Class 4 fauna studies were not currently a priority allocation. She had kept recording anyway. When Cal told her what had happened, she did not say anything for almost 30 seconds. She was sitting at her desk, and she looked at Cal the way she looked at lab results that had come back with something unexpected. Then she stood up, walked to her window, and looked out at the ridge in the distance. "I want to come with you tonight," she said. "I do not know if they will come back," Cal said. "I want to be there if they do," she said. They came back. Not just the cub and the mother that night. It was the mother alone, Ada standing at the fence line in the early dark, watching. Lena filmed everything from the shadow of the utility shed 30 meters back, keeping still and quiet the way Cal had taught her. Cal went to the fence. The mother watched him for a while. Then she made the same low, layered sound she had made the first night. And Cal returned the lowered head, and she stood there for another few minutes before leaving. It became a pattern over the following week. The mother came most evenings. Sometimes the cub came with her. Twice, 2 other adults from what appeared to be the same bonded unit came as well. Larger than the mother, broader across the chest, with coats that ran more toward deep green than violet. They stayed farther back and watched. They never approached the fence the way the mother did, but they were clearly there with her, and not by accident. Lena recorded all of it. She began cataloging the vocalizations, the different sounds the mother made, the sounds the other adults made in response, the sounds the cub made when it was near the fence versus when it was farther away. It was slow work, and she knew she was only scratching the surface of it. But what she was seeing was already enough to make her sit very still at her desk late at night, going through the footage with careful eyes. The creatures communicated in layers. Not just sound, but body posture, ear position, tail movement. All of it working together in combinations that changed meaning the way changing one word in a sentence changes the whole thing. Lena had studied enough basic xenobiology to know that complex layered communication in a non-human species was not, by itself, a proof of higher intelligence. Plenty of Earth animals communicated in sophisticated ways, but what she was seeing was not just sophisticated, it was structured, consistent, repeatable. And then she saw the lesson. It was on the 5th evening. The mother had come with the cub and one of the broad-chested adults. Cal was at the fence as usual, crouching, patient. The cub moved around the fence line, and the mother made a series of sounds while doing something very specific with her body. A slow movement of her head in Cal's direction, repeated twice, followed by a sound that Lena had heard before only when the family unit was moving toward a known safe water source. Lena watched this happen 3 times over the course of the evening. She went back through her older footage. She found the same combination, the head gesture toward something, the specific sound, used twice before near what she had mapped as a regular resting spot, and once near a spot she believed was a food source. She called Cal into the medical building the next morning and showed him the footage on her screen. "She is teaching the cub about you," Lena said. "The same gesture and sound they use for safe places, for places worth knowing about and returning to. She is putting you in the same category as their water source." Cal looked at the screen for a long time. "That is a big conclusion," he said. "I know," Lena said. "I have been trying to find a smaller one that fits the data. I cannot find one." Pete, who had come in behind Cal, leaned against the wall with his arms crossed. "This is going to be a problem," he said. "Mike, the authorities' inspection flight is in 6 weeks. If Inspector Holt comes out here and sees what is happening at that fence every evening, the non-contact order is going to come down hard. They could find the colony. They could remove Cal." "I know," Cal said. "So what are you going to do?" Cal looked at the paused image on Lena's screen. The mother, mid-gesture, her head turned toward where he had been standing at the fence. The cub beside her, watching the same direction. The broad-chested adult in the background, watching the mother. A whole family paying careful attention to the same ordinary human man who fixed water pipes and ate his meals quietly and did not say much to anyone. "I am going to go back to the ridge tonight," Cal said. Pete made a short sound that was not quite a laugh and not quite a sigh. "Man, I figured you would say that." "You do not have to come," Cal said. "I know I do not have to," Pete said. He pushed off from the wall and picked up his jacket from the chair. "What time?" The trouble started at midday on a Thursday, and it started fast. A cascading fault in the relay station's power regulator sent a surge through the outer grid. The engineers described it later as the electrical equivalent of a pressure wave. Everything downstream from the regulator received a jolt that it was not built to absorb. Most of the colony's systems handled it without damage. The water recycling units tripped offline and restarted, which gave Cal 20 minutes of anxious work checking the restart logs. The hall's lighting flickered and held. The monitoring stations rebooted and came back up with minor data gaps. 3 of the outer sensor fence posts did not hold. The surge reached the capacitors in posts 4, 7, and 9 at the same moment, and those capacitors, which were 3 years old and had been flagged in Cal's maintenance notes as due for replacement, failed outright. They did not fail quietly. Post 7 went first, and the sound of it was a sharp crack like something very large breaking. Posts 4 and 9 followed within seconds. The housing on post 9 blew outward entirely, sending fragments of metal casing across the ridge in a low arc. One fragment struck a dry patch of scrubland brush 50 meters out. The brush caught. The fire was small at first. The wind was not strong that morning, and the ground near the colony was mostly hard-packed dust with not much to burn. But 50 meters out where the scrubland thickened, there was more fuel. Dry root grass, low woody shrubs, the kind of vegetation that burns hot and spreads sideways before it spreads up. The fire found this material and changed character. Within 10 minutes, it had a front 60 meters wide and was moving toward the high ground. Donna Falk sent out the distress beacon at 12 minutes after the initial surge. She did it calmly and without drama, the way she did most things. Then she got on the colony-wide channel and told everyone what was happening and what they needed to do. The Waterdome team began emergency protocols. The engineers isolated the damaged fence section. People moved with the particular focused urgency of a small community that has run enough drills to know what the first 5 minutes of a crisis require. See, Cal was at the water recycling station when the distress beacon went out. He finished his restart check, confirmed the units were stable, and walked outside to see the smoke. It was thick and pale against the sky, rising from the scrubland at a point he recognized. He had walked that ground on the way to the ridge many times. He knew the terrain. He also knew, with a cold and specific certainty, that the area where the fire was spreading was where Dusk's bonded family unit sheltered during the midday heat. He had seen them there through Lena's long-range camera, a cluster of low rock formations with natural shade. The creatures used it consistently, reliably, every midday for as long as Lena had been filming. Cal stood outside the recycling station and looked at the smoke for a moment, and then he walked to the emergency equipment shed and took the foam suppression cart. It was a small vehicle, a flatbed with a tank of fire suppression foam and a hose arm, designed for handling small outbreaks around the colony perimeter. It was not designed for what Cal was thinking of doing with it. Pete came around the corner of the shed at a fast walk and stopped when he saw Cal getting into the cart. "What are you doing?" Pete said. "The fire is going toward the shelter area," Cal said. He started the cart's motor. "Cal, the fence is open at post 9. If you drive out there—" "I know," Cal said. Pete looked at him, then he stepped back. "Be fast," he said. Cal drove through the gap where post 9 had been. The ground outside the fence was rougher than the colony side, harder to navigate, and the cart bouncing over rock edges and dry ridges. The smoke was thicker out here, low and acrid. He could feel it on the back of his throat. He drove toward the fire's right edge, where the burn was newer and the foam would do the most good, and began laying down a suppression line, a strip of foam across the scrubland that cut off the fire's path toward the rock formation shelter. He was working the second pass of the line when he saw them. 2 of the broad-chested adults from Dusk's family unit, the ones he recognized from the evening fence visits, caught between the fire on one side and the burning fence debris on the other. The corridor between the two was narrowing as the fire spread. The creatures were moving back and forth along the gap, testing it, not finding a way through. Cal pointed the cart at the gap and drove into it. The foam arm was still running, laying suppression down on both sides of the path he was cutting. It was not a clean line. It was not a tidy piece of work, but it was enough. The foam knocked the heat back on both sides of the corridor, and the path opened. The 2 adults moved through it. They ran, fast and low, the way large cats run when they have decided that speed is the only thing that matters. Cal held the cart still while they passed on both sides of him. And then one of them, the closer one, the one with the deeper green coat, did something that Cal was not prepared for. It slowed as it passed, just for a moment, and it pressed the side of its enormous head against Cal's shoulder, a brief and deliberate contact, heavy and warm. Then it was gone, moving up the ridge with the other adult. Cal sat in the cart with the foam arm dripping and the smoke moving around him in pale sheets. From farther up the ridge, from somewhere in the rock formation above the fire line, a single sound came down, long, resonant, layered, Dusk's voice, loud enough to reach the colony, loud enough that later 3 colonists would mention hearing something unusual from the direction of the ridge, a sound they could not place during the crisis. Cal drove the cart back through the fence gap as the authorities' emergency response shuttle broke atmosphere overhead. A bright line against the smoke-hazed sky, descending fast toward the colony's landing pad. It had been dispatched early when the distress beacon went out. He had not expected it this soon, but he pulled the cart to a stop just inside the broken fence line as the shuttle touched down and its ramp dropped. A woman in an authority inspection jacket stepped out, tall, precise-looking, with a recorder unit on her lapel that was already running. She looked at the broken fence posts. She looked at the smoke. She looked at Cal, sitting in the emergency foam cart outside the perimeter, covered in suppressant residue, with no good explanation visible from any angle. She walked toward him with the measured pace of someone who has a great many questions and intends to ask all of them. Cal got out of the cart and waited for her. Inspector Vera Holt was not a cruel woman. Cal figured that out within the first 10 minutes of sitting across from her in the colony's small meeting room. She was precise, careful, and completely focused. The kind of person who has done difficult work for long enough that she no longer needs to raise her voice or make threats to let you know she is serious. She simply asked questions, and she listened to the answers with her full attention, and when she needed clarification, she asked for that too. Her recorder was running the whole time. She had told Cal this before they started, which he appreciated. He did not like surprises of that kind. She started with the fence. She had the engineering logs from the surge, the post-failure timestamps, the damage assessment report that Amy Grove had filed within the hour. She walked through all of it item by item, and Cal confirmed each point. This part was straightforward. It was an equipment failure. Then it was Cal's maintenance notes that had flagged the capacitors as overdue for replacement. This was noted, reviewed, set aside for the technical side of the inquiry. Then she asked about the foam cart. Cal told her everything. He started from the beginning. The cub on the ridge, the ration bar, the drainage grate. He told her about the 11 minutes at the fence on the second night, and about the lowered head, and about what that had meant to him, even if he had not had words for it at the time. He told her about the following week, the pattern of evening visits, and about Lena's recordings. He told her about the lesson, the mother teaching the cub, the gestures that matched the ones used for safe places and things worth knowing. He told her what he had seen during the fire, and why he had driven the cart through the gap, and what had happened when the two adults ran past him through the corridor he had cut. Vera listened to all of it without interrupting. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment, looking at her notes. "You knew, when you drove through that gap, that you were in violation of the non-contact order," she said. "Yes," Cal said. "And you did it anyway." "Yes." "Why?" Cal thought about it. He was not a man who gave quick answers to questions that deserved better. "Because they were going to die if I did not," he said, "and because they were not strangers to me by that point. I knew them. I knew where they sheltered and when. I knew the mother's voice. I knew the cub's face." He paused. "I do not think the form I signed was written with that situation in mind?" Vera looked at him for a moment. Then she wrote something in her notes. "I would like to review Dr. Cross's recordings," she said. Lena brought everything she had. 3 weeks of footage, her vocalization logs, her behavioral notes, the comparative analysis she had built between the family unit's communication patterns at the fence and their patterns in the wild. She walked Vera through it the same way she had walked Cal through it, carefully, without rushing to conclusions, letting the data speak first. Vera watched the footage of the lesson twice. She asked Lena several detailed questions about the methodology, about how confident Lena was in the interpretation, about what alternative explanations she had considered and ruled out. Lena had good answers to all of them. She had been asking herself the same questions for weeks. The first day of the inquiry ended without a finding. Vera said she needed to review everything overnight. Cal went to bed without knowing what the morning would bring. What the morning brought was something none of them had planned for. At dawn, before the inquiry's second session was scheduled to begin, dusk came to the fence. She did not come alone. All 7 adults of the bonded family unit were with her, spread in a loose arc along the outer edge of the sensor line. The broken posts had been replaced with temporary units overnight, but the fence was back up and active. The cub was there too, sitting close to Dusk's front leg. It was fully light when Vera stepped outside. Cal had been called out first, and he was standing near the fence when the inspector came around the corner of the outer shed and stopped. Now she looked at the line of creatures along the perimeter, the iridescent coats catching the morning light, the amber eyes watching the colony with patient attention. 7 large adults and a cub, all present, all still. Cal did not say anything. He watched Vera watch them. Dusk, from her position directly opposite the section of fence where Cal was standing, turned her head. She looked at Vera. Fully, directly, the way she had looked at Cal on the first night, with that particular quality of attention that was not aggression and was not simple animal curiosity, but was something else, something more considered than either. And then she lowered her head, the same gesture, slow, deliberate, all the way down and held there for a breath before lifting again. Lena, who had come outside behind Vera with her recorder already running, I said quietly, "In 3 years of observation, no member of this species has approached the colony boundary in full group formation, in daylight, and initiated contact. This has never happened before." Vera stood there for a long time. The morning wind moved through the scrubland. The relay tower hummed. The cub leaned against Dusk's leg and watched the humans watching them. Vera turned to Lena. "How long would it take you to prepare a full first contact documentation package? Something the xenobiology office could use. Footage, behavioral analysis, communication mapping, full record of the contact events?" Lena said, "I have most of it ready. I have been building it for 2 years. A week to finish the formal structure, maybe less." Vera nodded. She looked back at the fence line for one more moment, and then she went back inside to finish her notes. That evening, Cal sat on the outer ridge as the sun went down. The cub was asleep against his side, its weight warm and heavy, its breathing slow. Dusk was a few meters away, watching the sky the way she often did in the evenings, some private attention directed at something Cal could not see. The rest of the family unit was spread across the high ground behind her, going about the quiet business of a day's end. Pete came out with 2 cups of coffee and dropped down beside Cal. He handed one over without comment. They sat together for a while, watching the first moon rise. "What do you think happens now?" Pete said. "With the authority? With all of it?" Cal thought about it. He looked at the cub and at Dusk, and at the wide, dark sky filling up with stars above Calloway's reach, above this last dot before the blank, this unremarkable colony at the far edge of everything. "I think they will do what they always do," Cal said. "Send more people, ask more questions, argue about it for a while, and then, slowly, figure out how to do right by it." "You sound sure," Pete said. "I am not sure about much," Cal said, "but that is usually how it starts." The cub shifted in its sleep and pressed its nose against Cal's knee. Dusk made one low sound, soft, brief, and settled into stillness. The colony hummed behind them. The stars came out one by one, and on the ridge at the edge of the world, a man and his friend drank their coffee and let the night come in around them.